Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for coming and for braving our charming Central New York weather that real tested your commitment. So thank you very much for coming out. My name is Bruce Rutherford. I teach in the Political Science Department. And I'm really grateful for all of you making the effort to come because it gives us enough people to have a really interesting discussion, I think, with a really fascinating group of people that I'll tell you a bit more about in a moment. But I wanted to begin by thanking the many people that we owe thanks to for having the opportunity to gather here this afternoon. First off, I want to thank Lisa Sopolis in the back from Off-Campus Studies, who was the person who had the idea for this panel initially. And she is related to one of our panelists, Timothy LaRose, who I'll tell you about in a moment. But Lisa had the terrific suggestion that perhaps there might be some student interest in learning a bit more about careers in international relief work. And the panel grew from that idea. So thank you, Lisa. We've received terrific support from several offices on campus, Career Services, the Cove, Peace and Conflict Studies, and Off-Campus Studies. And we've been particularly fortunate to have support from the Lampert Institute, who not only helped out with the financial end of things, but Shelley Wyman, the AA for the Lampert Institute, was really pivotal in handling the administrative side of this. And Jason Wall, the director of the Lampert Institute, was terrific both in offering ideas and helping out with the funding side of this. So we're very grateful to the Lampert Institute. And I wanted to give Jason a chance to speak with you a bit about the Institute, and then I'll introduce our guests.
Well, thanks, everyone. And yeah, Lampert Institute, we're really happy to be part of this panel and being able to bring this amazing group together. I just had three quick announcements with respect to the Lampert Institute. So first, for those of you who are applying for the Lampert Summer Fellowships in Public Policy, again, the deadline for those is 5 p.m. on Sunday. So hopefully they're well on their way. Just a reminder. And if you haven't started yet, it's maybe too late. I don't know. And the other things I just want to mention are a couple of events coming up, which I'd imagine might be of interest to people if you're coming to this event. So on Wednesday, February 22nd at 4:15, a little earlier than usual, we're having a talk by Todd Schulte, and he's the president of Forward.us. And it's a group, it's an organization that's been led by key leaders from the tech industry, so Mark Zuckerberg's involved, Bill Gates, and so on. And they focus on questions of immigration and the economy, particularly with respect to technology and the science fields. And he's going to be giving a talk on the title, Immigration Reform, Perspectives from the Front Lines of a Broken Immigration System. So that's Wednesday the 22nd at 4:15, and that'll be in 101 in the Ho Science Building. And just a second talk that I'd also like to mention, and this one's in March, but it's by a Colgate alum, Michelle Klein-Solomon, class of '83, who's the director of the Migration Policy Research and Communications Department at the International Organization for Migration. And she'll be speaking on international migration and human mobility, opportunity or threat in an interconnected and insecure world. So that's on March 8th. That's a Wednesday, 4:30 in 101 Ho. So there'll be announcements and so on, but I just wanted to flag those ahead for everyone here. And with that, I'll turn things back to Bruce.
Thank you very much, Jason. I wanted to give you a quick overview of what the format's going to be this afternoon. I'm going to ask each of our presenters to give a short presentation, maybe 15, 16, 17 minutes each. Then we'll take a break, and hopefully the food will be there by then. Let everybody get some food if you would like. I should mention everybody's invited to dinner, and what's more, it's really excellent Lebanese food, so it's really good food. So you're really lucky you came this afternoon. So by all means, please join us for food. And then I'll ask us to reconvene, and we can have ask some questions of our panelists, and perhaps have a bit of a discussion as well. And each of our panelists have really fascinating and interesting backgrounds, and will really come out in more depth during the discussion. I wanted to tell you a bit about each of our panelists. I'll start off with Timothy LaRose, the gentleman immediately on my right, who is currently a senior communications specialist working with Envision, which is an NGO that focuses on neglected tropical diseases. But he's had a very long and interesting and diverse career. He's had served as chief of communications for the UN's Office on Children in Armed Conflict, based in New York, but traveled to Afghanistan, Central African Republic, Chad, Somalia, South Sudan, Uganda, and other areas as well. Has also been based in Austria and in Kenya and Qatar, dealing with communications issues related to human trafficking, corruption, piracy, and drug trafficking. And the experience that he's going to be talking about in some depth here today is his work with UNICEF in Guinea from 2013 to 2016, where he was in charge of UNICEF's communications efforts there. Our second speaker is going to be Tracy Hansel, who's sitting in the center. She has a really fascinating background. She has a BA in French and Environmental Sciences from the University of Virginia. And from that background, which would seem to be a very unscientific in character, she ended up heading in a medical direction, doing a master's degree in public health, eventually earning a degree as a doctor and becoming an MD, and then going to New Zealand to practice, then working with Indian Health Services in Gallup, New Mexico to practice as well. And then with Doctors Without Borders in Rwanda, where she worked, I believe, for a year. How long were you in Rwanda?
Haiti first.
Excuse me, Haiti, sorry.
And then Rwanda. Probably about 4 or 5 months.
Okay, 4 or 5 months in Haiti, sorry. And then spent a month in Rwanda teaching at a medical school there. So it had a remarkably interesting, wide range of experiences. And she's now in Rome, New York, working with Veterans Affairs. Not quite as interesting a place perhaps as the other spots, but nonetheless, still doing interesting and important work here in central New York. And to her right is Susan Thompson, who many of you know, Assistant Professor of Peace and Conflict Studies here at Colgate. She was a human rights lawyer in Rwanda, working first with the United Nations and then with U.S. Agency for International Development, investigating genocide crimes there. She's the author of Whispering Truth to Power, Everyday Resistance to Reconciliation in Post-Genocide Rwanda, and also Rwanda 1994 to 2014, A Phoenix from the Ashes, which is forthcoming with Yale University Press. So we have a remarkably interesting and accomplished panel who've been very kind to take time out of their schedules to come join us today. Would you please join me in welcoming? Why don't we start with Timothy?
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Bruce and Jason and Steve for inviting me. Can you hear me in the back? Is it loud enough? I know that many of you are probably considering careers in international development, relief, that kind of thing, so I thought I would sort of walk you through my last assignment in Guinea as a sort of case study as to what it might be like to have a job in the field working in an emergency. So I'll just start off there. I first moved to Guinea in 2013, right before the Ebola outbreak. No one knew what Guinea was when I told them we were going to Guinea. They said, of course, that even French speakers and people who are familiar with the UN and Africa were all kind of wondering what Guinea was. But by 2014, everybody in the world knew where Guinea was because that's where the Ebola outbreak started. As we said, I was the head of communications for UNICEF. In the early days before everything happened, I was kind of frustrated because there wasn't a lot of international attention on Guinea, and there wasn't a lot for me to do, there wasn't a lot of news, and I thought this is going to be kind of a boring job. But immediately I did realize that there were health issues, major health issues in the country, and that was pretty much indicated us by the many vaccine campaigns we did, polio, and then we had a massive measles outbreak in January, right before the Ebola outbreak. So I wanted to show you a video that gives a sense of what the health system is like in Guinea before Ebola and what it entered into. It wasn't a vacuum at all. It was, still work full screen?
Mm-hmm. Clicking them.
Nani Kiati's 9-month-old baby needs an injection to help him breathe. He's been diagnosed with measles.
I can't.
Sorry, don't you do trigger warnings here? Or is that, okay, I don't know. I read about that. This is sad.
To the hospital, they looked at my son and they asked me to buy some medicine. I bought it, but the fever has continued. His temperature is high. I'm sorry, I cannot speak.
This baby has blood around his nose and mouth because he can't breathe. Both need oxygen, but conditions at the main hospital in Conakry are dire. Mothers have to fetch water in a bucket for their babies, and some days there's no electricity.
Here we have a baby suffering from measles who has severe complications with pneumonia. The other baby laying over there has the same. They need oxygen. but we cannot connect them because there is no electricity today.
A UN survey shows that only 37% of children in Guinea get all the vaccinations they need to stay healthy, making the majority vulnerable. UNICEF says one child has been confirmed dead since the outbreak began in November, but the real number may be much higher.
3 babies died in front of me, and this one here. Before they admitted us, some parents I met told me that 7 babies already died here before I arrived with my baby.
The UN says Guinea's many years of political instability meant that it was almost impossible to get funding or aid. Even now, with a Western-backed civilian government in place, most people live on less than $1 a day. In partnership with the government, aid agencies want to start vaccinating children next week, but an appeal for aid earlier this week has been unanswered. They still need $1 million and more than 1 million vaccines. Measles is easily preventable, but it's also very contagious, so many more children are at risk. Nali's son died a day after we filmed him because he wasn't vaccinated and because there was no electricity to give him oxygen. Joanna Blundell, Al Jazeera.
So that's the main hospital. They're refurbishing it now. You can see why Ebola was such a problem. And so my day-to-day work in Guinea during was to secure press coverage for our work with UNICEF to ensure transparency so that people knew where all this money coming in was going. So I would do that by regularly posting on social media, taking journalists to the field, writing stories, writing blogs, conducting interviews, serving as a spokesperson. I think I've been to the field in Guinea during Ebola about 35 times. One time I stayed for a month, which was, I'm really proud of that, but it was really hard. And then I want to show you my last video here. It's a video that we were producing. I was producing in the field during a UNICEF activity, which is one of our activities to prevent Ebola, is to teach people about hand washing and how to avoid for contracting Ebola from other people. And so we were conducting one of those activities in the field, and we found somebody who was sick with Ebola. So you'll see that happen. I apologize, it's a woman who's not the native English speaker, so it might be hard to understand, but I think you'll get the idea.
The beginning of this disease, many people say Ebola is not real. We try to give them the knowledge. Sensibilization is a team of young people. They come in the community, family by family. If you want to make the change of behavior, you must show the practice. Chaque fois, prendre le temps. Ne soyez jamais pressé pour laver les mains. Les maladies viennent se mettre sous les ongles ici. Hein? Tout le monde se lave la main. We show them how we must wash properly. Learning by doing. If every Guinean wash their hands properly several times in the day, we have more luck to finish with Ebola. Même s'il faut 10 fois, 20 fois, 100 fois, c'est le lavage des mains. Avec ça, il n'y a pas Ebola. Et ça, c'est le geste qui sauve la vie. She is sick, but we don't know if it is Ebola or not. The children cry, and we try to explain them if it is Ebola, she can receive the best treatment in the hospital. Pas pleurer. Si maman est malade, on la soigne. Tu veux garder maman rester malade et puis s'il y a un problème? We try to tell them, Mama will come back. We engage ourselves to fight against Ebola, to finish with Ebola. Wisdom in the community.
That's my good friend Miriam. I think she single-handedly ended Ebola. She went to every village, everyone knew her, she was amazing. She could convince anyway, the woman did survive, and she came home, and because she came home, it was a lot easier for other people to be convinced to go get treatment. Before she had gone, nobody had gone and survived. So her not only, I mean, I went and spent a day with her taking photographs, and she was like 3 days out of the Ebola treatment center. She was working in the fields, and I was like, okay, I don't understand. But anyway, so that was a happy story in the end. And we visited, you see these villages, you don't just go there once, you go there all the time. All the time. You see the same people all the time. And that was, that's sort of one of the benefits to being, Bruce mentioned I was in Afghanistan, Somalia. I was in those countries for like a week, 2 weeks, and they were really intense, but you don't get the relationship like you get if you live in the field. And you get to follow people's lives, and so that was really important. And just to conclude, working in the field is what everybody says it is. It's adventurous, it's dangerous, it's scary, it's exciting. But after a long time, it does take a toll. And I just wanted to finish by reading a letter I wrote to my family, a different letter for those of you who acknowledge. When I finally got out of Guinea after a while. Dear friends and family, after 3 years and 2 months, I'm out. No more cold showers with no pressure, and water so dirty I don't dare let a drop in my mouth. No more choosing between the shirts with worn-out collars and the shirts with worn-out cuffs. No more 7th floor elevator gamble. No more surly taxi driver complaining when I'm 2 minutes late. No more police shouting jokingly as they pass the press, and then they pull over my taxi and ask for a ride. No more rapid rolling up the window as we drive through the open sewage, or the quick elbow retraction as we nearly sideswipe other vehicles on a narrow road. No more dodging chickens and children and potholes and parkers and porcine and canine copulation in the middle of the road. No more waiting 20 to 30 minutes so I can check my email or send an urgent message. No more picking live and dead ants out of my coffee, indistinguishable from the undissolved instant coffee. No more clumps of undissolved instant milk as a last sip. No more bonjour, pardon, merci. No more confusing German and French, and not even realizing it. No more dodging trucks on the way home and the far worse elevator gamble on the way up. No more goodnight calls to the family, which last 30 minutes but only consist of 3 minutes of talk time because of the connection. No more skunked beer and corked wine and barely tolerating dinner and wondering if my apartment is going to burn down or simply collapse in the night, or cleaning up floodwaters that have entered after the evening storms. I mentioned I'm on the 7th floor. No more letting mosquitoes bite me because I'm afraid of the dreaded Nairobi fly, which if you crush it will spread acid on your skin, like flying poison ivy. No more worrying about malaria, which I somehow never got, but I won't know for sure for 6 months. Or yellow fever, or Zika, or dengue, or typhoid. No more, Papa, are you coming to my house soon? Papa, where are you? There are a lot of positive things I could say I'm missing. The adventure, the people, the results of the work. But this is what I'm thinking about today. I bought a pair of boots right when I arrived in Guinea, and I wore them pretty much every day. The color matched the reddish-brown African soil. They're covered in bleach stains from various Ebola treatment centers and need new laces. But they held up pretty well. The night before I left, I dreamt the soles fell off, and that they were too worn out to be worn again. Anyway, I'm glad to be home. Thank you.
Go from the communications officer to the position, so my speaking skills not so great. What I thought I would do is just kind of go through a little bit of like my path from college onward, and I'll try to run through it quickly. I kind of forget what happened at certain points because it was kind of a bit of a wandering path, but it might be reassuring if you're thinking like, I don't really know what I want to do. I don't know which path to go. Like, is this something I really love? Do I like my degree that I've picked? That it does matter, just pick something and do it, but try to do something you like, and then if you don't like it later, you can always switch. So I ended up doing, I got into just wanting to do something international. My mom was a ESL teacher at the refugee center in Utica, and that's where I grew up, and ever since that time I wanted to do something. I thought Peace Corps initially, so I went to UVA and did environmental science and French. And I definitely say, and I'm sure if you want to do international work, others would agree that getting a second language is key. So French I didn't think was that useful at first, because I was thinking, oh, I should do Spanish, there's so much more opportunities here for Spanish. But internationally, I found the French to be really helpful to have. So, and that actually opened a lot of doors later. And so I went to environmental science and French. I did a study abroad in France. And that was another experience where I'd say, you know, doing something where you're actually like using the language and getting out was helpful. After that, I tried to get into the Peace Corps. I was all set to go, and you'll notice this is a theme with anything I've tried to do internationally. All set to go, bags packed, and then there was a medical thing that came up, and then they pushed my my departure out a year. And I was just like waiting to go. I'm like, I got my student loans piling up. I kind of got to get on with life and find a job. So I ended up actually finding a friend that had gone to France with the French embassy as a teaching assistant. So they had a position that opened up in that. So I ended up going to France for a little bit to teach English for about 6 or 7 months because that position, somebody had left, so that's where that opening came in. So that kind of happened at the last minute. And that really helped my French speaking skills, which was beneficial later on as well. So after that, I don't even remember exactly where I went from there. I got back looking for work. I thought I'd get more into the environmental science, and I figured that would be, like I'd work more in water and getting water internationally, and that was an interest of mine. And somehow I ended up teaching math instead, and then deciding that I wanted to maybe go back into medicine, or get into medicine, so then I started doing prereqs at the community college, at the Mohawk Valley Community College. I did that, and then for about for 1 semester, got some of the prereqs, and then decided that wasn't really a good fit. So I moved to Portland, Oregon. And that was not, maybe without a job. I'm like, yeah, there's no one looking for barista and environmental science jobs in Portland, Oregon. With no experience. I'm like, so I was there with, I had a lot of people to hang out with at 11 o'clock in the morning looking for jobs, but so that kind of led to a couple different paths. I ended up teaching out there as well, getting a few more prerequisites for medical school, and then I decided public health was actually a better fit, that I could do kind of an environmental health, and then go abroad and do something with environmental health. So I finished my 2-year MPH, and then I decided at the end of that I really didn't need the medical degree to feel better about what I was doing in public health, and that would be a better path to take. So I ended up going to medical school out in Portland, Oregon as well. And then towards the end of that, I'm like, all right, this is it. I've got like a few medical skills. I'm gonna get somewhere and go use them. So we convinced that one of the residency programs that was going to Kenya to have us come, a couple of med students go with them. Well, that was like 2007, 2008. All ready to go for that one too. And then 2007, they had elections. It was kind of a crisis time, 2007, 2008. actually the town I was supposed to go to, I keep saying El Doré, but I think they say El Doré, ended up, a bunch of people ended up being burned in a church, and I was supposed to go the week actually that happened, was when I was supposed to leave. So I didn't end up going there. I actually ended up in China instead for a month. I had no other rotation planned and ended up doing acupuncture course in China, and that worked out because now I'm actually getting certified in Boston for acupuncture to do along with medicine at VA. So I'm like, every path that didn't work out kind of worked out in some way, shape, or form down the road. So, so after that happened, then I went to internal medicine residency in Colorado, and I picked that because they had an HIV primary care track. So I figured that would be a good to have more of the HIV experience for working internationally. Although I ended up not doing much HIV work at all in any of my sets, but it's good to have. And then I finished there, and I tried to do a rotation during residency. That again fell through. So I'm like, maybe I'm really just meant to hang out in the U.S. and not like roam New York and just be there. But then afterwards, I got at the end of residency, I got a position in New Zealand and a position in Zimbabwe. And I think about now, which way my path could have gone. At the time, I was, as you mentioned in your letter, like at the time, I just felt like I needed a place to go, be able to hike and run and do whatever, kind of just unwind a little bit after residency. In Zimbabwe, well, it was kind of what I wanted to be doing. I would be running a school or part of a medical student program. I was like, I just can't do it right now. Like I just couldn't. I didn't want to be chauffeured everywhere. I wanted to get out and be able to just unwind a little bit. So I ended up taking the New Zealand position, and that was fantastic, and that helped me later on. I got down to the bottom of the South Island in a town of 2,000 by myself, like 5 days out of residency. And then the ambulance is, like one day I answered my cell phone, it's the ambulance calling me. I'm like, oh, this is how this works? Like no one really kind of filled me in on some of that. But it was a small town, it was a great experience. I was doing like, running my own blood test, and you're kind of doing everything there. So that was good for later on when you don't have as many resources in the medical community that we do here. So that was helpful. And then after I got back from there, I was down in New Zealand for a year. Tried to do something on Christmas Island, volunteer work too. That fell through. So I'm just really not that. But then got back and ended up with one of the contacts I met in New Zealand, ended up going down to Haiti with a group called Colgate Santé, and they had more of a public health framework than doing direct medical care. So I went down there and I did mostly teaching in Cap-Haitian, which is in the northern part of Haiti, and teaching with the residents. They had a residency program through their health system there. And their goal is mainly to support the Haitian public health system and just offer technical support. So there's physicians that would come down for a week at a time. I was there for a couple months, more just to see what they were doing and just to observe a bit. I think that was one of the things I learned pretty quickly, that if you go into a place where you're just trying to make changes and you come in with your like American knowledge, that does not go so well. So just observing and seeing like what people wanted and really making sure like, what am I even doing there? I mean, I had a lot of questions and doubts about what am I even doing here? Like there's this doctor that didn't get paid for the month from the health system because something fell through. And I'm like, look at all these people he could see in a month for what I paid for my plane ticket. So I definitely think there's a role in what can be done, but I think it's just being careful about where you fit in and what you can do and having reasonable expectations too. So I found the teaching to be extremely rewarding because that I felt like, all right, I could offer something, I could teach students there that would go on to, who know their culture, know their language, and could go on to see how many more people. So if I taught 100 students, think about all those people that they would go on to take care of. To me, that was like a lot more rewarding than me seeing patients for a week. I also signed up for a couple programs that went to like El Salvador, where you go for like a week or two and then you treat people, and I'm like, especially internal medicine, that can make more sense in some of the surgical fields, but I'm like, why am I starting blood pressure medications on people and I'm never going to see them again? Like, how is that really helpful? So that made me question a little bit, and I picked a bit more carefully what I did after that. When I got back from Haiti that time, I ended up out in New Mexico working at Indian Health Service, and that honestly, that was like a whole nother world too. So even though, you're still in the US, that was an amazing experience. I was on the Navajo reservation there, and people, we went out into the community, and actually I did more HIV work there than I did in Haiti. But out into the community in the Navajo, and just seeing like the Hogans and learning more about the culture, I found really fascinating. So I was doing that while I was waiting, because I'd already applied for Doctors Without Borders, but that process takes quite some time. So I think patience is the other thing, as far as just being flexible, and if there were so many times along the way, I'm like, I just want to go, like I'm ready, like I don't have a mortgage or anything going on right now, I can just get out there. So, but then that waiting period. So I took a lot of temp jobs, which was nice that I had that opportunity. I worked at Bassett for a bit in Cooperstown, and then the New Mexico job. And then I got a call from Doctors Without Borders as I was heading back from New Mexico one week. And they're like, all right, you're going to Central African Republic next week. I'm like, oh, that's a lot of time to get my 15 kilograms that I can take in my backpack ready. Honestly, I didn't even know where Central African Republic was there, but that week, so I get ready, I didn't have my yellow fever vaccine, so I was delayed a week. And then I get, I'm looking at night, I'm working one night at Bassett, and I'm looking online, and I'm like, oh, there's a coup? Because this was right, there was a coup, and I probably had one of the last, I think I had one of the last visas while the country was still together to go. So I called Doctors Without Borders the next day. I'm like, I just see that the Doctors Without Borders Pediatric Hospital got just ransacked, and I'm like, am I still going tomorrow? And they're like, yeah, no, that's on hold for now. I'm like, okay. I was ready for like a little bit adventure. Honestly, I don't think I realized quite. I probably would not have gone, I would not have said okay to that site if I had realized like what was going on. But ignorance made not so bliss in that case. So I ended up, that got canceled, and then I ended up getting a placement in Madagascar, but it was a month out. So I didn't have a job at that point. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go to Bosnia for a month. So I had some fun in between doing that. But then the Madagascar trip fell through, and then I ended up going to Haiti with Doctors Without Borders. And that was a really tough but great experience. So I thought I'd show a little bit video clip. All my pictures, I have a lot of pictures at home with patients, but because of the privacy issues, I can't really show many of those. And my computer doesn't work anyway, so I'm hoping I can get that back at some point. But I don't know if that'd be interesting, I hate seeing my pictures of myself, or hearing myself talk, but I thought they show some pictures of the hospital and everything there too. And actually I was really impressed seeing, because I saw the National Hospital up in Cap-Haïtien, and that was a little bit on the rougher side. Like the Doctors Without Borders Hospital, they bring kind of everything and set it up there, and I mean, they've got it down to as far as transport and having a good system. And so I ended up going down there, and one of the things I was really impressed with, how many Haitian doctors, there was a nice, I thought, Doctors Without Borders, emergency, you get in there and you're, taking care of people, but I was surprised by the amount of national staff that had been hired by Doctors Without Borders. So I was working with mostly Haitian burn surgeons, Haitian orthopedic surgeons, and it was a really nice experience. And I also got to watch some of the French doctors come over, leaders come over and try to change everything in 2 weeks. So that's where that was amusing. And it was a nice, I don't know, I had a nice relationship with the Haitian staff there. So it was interesting to see when new people came in, what they try to do and change. But this is just a little bit of, just to kind of show you some of the pictures there too.
So my name is Tracy Hansel, and I am from upstate New York originally. And I just got back from my first mission with MSF in Haiti. Riyadh Hospital is the only place to get free burn care not only in Port-au-Prince, but in all of Haiti. Without much electricity, there's a lot of fires used for cooking, a lot of hot oils. So burns are unfortunately a common part of life there. So that first day was a bit overwhelming, working in the burn intensive care unit, and then also taking care of patients that had been there for months, requiring extensive burn care. there was one 20-year-old man that had tried to reach up for a mango with a pole and got electrocuted, had extensive burns and required amputations here. And another one with a similar story next to him. And these guys had been in their beds for months. One had been there for almost a year. And you can imagine their mood after being in the hospital for months without getting out. And even their families as well, having to take care of them and be stuck in the hospital. So I left that day, went back to the base, and was almost in tears. And one of the other volunteers sat down and just started playing the guitar, and just kind of took away some of the stress. I'm like, hey, if it helps for me, maybe it'll help for the patients in the burn unit too. So the next day, he got his guitar, came over to the burn unit with me, and started playing. And the first song, everybody was a little hesitant to start clapping, and then some of the family members started to get into it, start clapping. And then a patient that one of the nurses said hadn't smiled in about 6 months, started to have this huge grin on his face when the Bob Marley song started playing. It was probably like one of the best moments of my time there. And it was just overwhelming to see these guys that had gone through so much and have made it through so much in such a tough place to survive, finally have smiles on their faces. We get so caught up in the medical details sometimes that we forget about the whole person. And just seeing that and seeing these guys smile was a moment like I will never forget.
Sorry, I get a little worked up still watching it, which so both of the guys that were like the happiest in with the music, both of them died like 2 weeks after I left there too. So it's definitely something that,
Every family has that place where the food on the table is as important as...
I actually ended up leaving a little bit earlier. I was also in charge of, I was on call 24/7 for all the sexual assault cases, which I didn't have much experience at all before I got there. And I think that took its toll on me a little bit after time. I think it's good to realize, I knew I was I'm like, all right, I got about a month left in me. And I told them that, and they're like, we're getting out here. I was on 2 days later. They're like, they don't take any chances with people out in the field getting down. It made me feel good in a way, because I'm like, all right, they got my back. I wanted to give them notice to get somebody else in, because I wanted them to get a chance to get somebody else, and they're like, no, you're going now. So I think something to realize and know, I've learned a lot more about my limits and what I can do, and what I can handle, and that separation, watching the babies and the kids and the burn unit, and I only have so much that I can handle before I need to get out of that. So, and I don't know, and it was honestly nice to have a warm shower when I got back too. So I think some of those things, you forget the longer you're out, it only takes about 2 weeks to get used to your warm shower again and not appreciate it as much. But I think and that's why I appreciate coming here today to talk too, because it just brings things back and makes me realize there's, you gotta keep that fight going. So I'm glad that so many of you guys are interested in doing international work, and thank you for having me here today. I don't know about the salad commercial.
It's appearing on the streets, levels of prostitution.
I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm not at all in the medical field. That didn't work. I'm a human rights lawyer by first training. I knew that I would be a human rights lawyer in high school for reasons we can talk about later. I didn't know I would end up in Rwanda. That became kind of something that happened because, of course, I started my career in 1993, actually in Somalia. So I just had sort of fortuitous, or fortuitous, depending on your perspective, timing. I really cut my legal teeth in Rwanda, and the picture I have for you here is men who are accused of committing genocide. So that's one thing that comes up in human rights work. There are three main components: fact-finding, monitoring, and reporting. And I've done all three over the arc of my career, and even now that I'm faculty at Colgate, I continue to do reporting work, and I continue to write asylum affidavits that blend legal expertise to Rwandans, Congolese, Burundians, and actually Kenyans. I was actually doing elections monitoring in Kenya in 2007, also in Eldoret. These are people, though, this is a reality of the work. You will meet people who've committed heinous crimes. They will tell you things that don't make any sense. It is your job as a human being, but also as a lawyer, to see the human side of them. The Rwandan genocide, as you know, 1994, at least 500,000 people died. Hutu men like these killed their neighbors, their Tutsi neighbors. Some of them did not kill. This man, for example, this picture is taken in May 1994. I met him in April 2006. He was still languishing in prison. He had no additional files on his dossier. No one had done the fact-finding. So this is one thing that we do. We take the accused, we read their statements, we build a file, we hand it over to the domestic legal system. Politics being what they are, the government of Rwanda actually had no interest in prosecuting ordinary people like this. So fact-finding is a big deal because you interview, so you have to have a certain sense of history, a certain sense of culture. Preferably you speak at least one additional language. In the Rwandan case, Kinyarwanda. So you're always working with local people. So my team was translators, it was military escort, it was police escort, it was also handlers. So you would get government handlers who would try to befriend you. So to be mindful in these sort of post-conflict difficult situations that really no one is your friend, even other internationals, so the work can be very isolating and very lonely actually if you don't know sort of how to practice self-care. The other thing that we have to do is triangulate data. So there's a lot of material that goes into thinking about how do people survive the violence that they experience, and it needs to be triangulated. You need 3 independent sources. So this is another case that I worked on. This is violence that happened after the genocide. Why is this not working? Where's our IT dude? I blame you. The popular narrative, and this is where law is so important, the independence and verifiable facts. You're fine, I'm totally kidding. Everybody can see what's happening. Come live your life, it's fine. A lot of people thought the genocide ended in 1995. We were focusing on the men you saw on the previous slide. Building dossiers, triangulating data, compiling interview material about crimes they allegedly committed, big crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. This is actually an image from a place called Kibeho, April 1995. This is actually a internally displaced persons camp. The government of Rwanda is targeting Tutsi survivors of the genocide. They're being killed. That's a human rights abuse. A human rights abuse is when the state violates the rights of its people. It's not criminal, that's between 2 civilians. The government had a systematic plan that the UN uncovered and that we documented that the RPF was killing its own people. So for those of you that follow Rwanda, you know the Rwandan Patriotic Front frames itself as the heroes. They stopped the genocide. If you questioned this hero status, you could find yourself forcibly removed to a camp, so that's already a human rights violation, being forced to leave your home. Living in these conditions is actually also a violation of human rights. And then, of course, 3 days after I took this picture, the RPF shelled this camp with rocket-propelled grenades. We had to go in after and interview. So conditions can be very, very difficult. So you can already see that conditions are quite squalid. dirty, it's smelly, disease is an issue, people will hold on to you for dear life. Let me tell you what happened to me. And in a case like this, they want nothing more than to be seen. So you spend a lot of your time just literally sitting with people who've lost almost everything. All they have left to lose in this case is their life. And I don't know who survived and who didn't. I wasn't there on the day that the camp was shelled, but we do believe, and this is where the work can be dangerous, the RPF knew, the government knew that the UN was tracing these kinds of events, reporting them to the international donor community, reporting them to the UN Security Council. They didn't like it one bit. Many people died. The official narrative, 300 died. Our numbers show at least 4,000 people died. This is an event, if you Google it, very little information is known about it. This is where human rights fact-finding is so important. You create a dossier of atrocity, and that can be obviously personally grueling, but it can also be profoundly rewarding because you have the evidence. You triangulate it through ballistic missiles, forensic material, interview material, and statistical material with military and other officials. The second thing that we do in human rights monitoring is to keep track of what governments are doing. This is an image that I took in May 1995. The man in the blue cap is Romeo Dallaire's replacement. You've probably all heard of Romeo Dallaire. He was the head of the UN peacekeeping mission in Rwanda. He burnt out, as you know. He cracked up. He left. This is his replacement, a French-Canadian named Marcel Toussaint. We were embedded with the peacekeepers from 1994 through to 1997. These are government officials, military officials as well. Those two categories are sometimes blurry. They refuse to dress in military clothing to show the head of the UN peacekeeping mission that they did not respect his authorities. You can see that he's wearing, you would know from local knowledge, his RPF beret. You can see the body language on these individuals as well. It's a very tense moment. So there are many moments sitting around, waving, cars, fighting over who gets the car with the radio, fighting over who gets the car with the best walkie-talkie system, and then you get into these moments of intense seriousness. What we have here is a military commander who took orders from the highest levels of government and had just ordered the mass murder of at least 5,000 people. We could count at least 5,000 dead. Toussaint is saying, we know you did it. Eventually, and I can't show you any of this because this is the only photo I have, these individuals went back to their base, brought AK-47s, and threatened Toussaint to leave. So when you're documenting, when you're witnessing, there's lots of things you can't write down. There's lots of things you can't pursue. So we all know the disgrace in which the United Nations peacekeeping mission ended its work in Rwanda. This is one of the last tense moments that we have. So moving beyond fact-finding, we turn to monitoring. This is an image from November 1996. So 2 years, 2.5 years actually, after the genocide, the government had decided everyone in the refugees in Congo had to come back. So the job of a human rights monitor in this situation is to fingerprint and keep track of each of those individuals. They must be documented under international law to be returned individuals. So they're refugees being forced home. In addition to this fingerprinting and having them returned to their homes, the monitoring included building dossiers for judicial trials. So this is also a deeply politicized setting in that most of this crowd did not participate in the genocide. They were caught up in it, they fled, they were pushed back. The actual number of guilty, we could not determine because the government would not facilitate our work. There are indeed some. The government declared this whole group of people and groups like them guilty. And we have a situation in which judicial monitoring becomes deeply politicized because, of course, the government only wants to prosecute through victor's justice. They want to prosecute those that support their narrative. And this is one thing where human rights monitors need to be careful. In seeking to hold governments accountable, you can put yourself at great risk. So you can look at this and think, well, most of them are innocent, I'm not going to open a dossier. But the local official will come with his weapon and his posture and ask for your stack of papers. So there can be ethical, professional, personal conundrums that you have to confront in the course of this kind of work. Let's see here, last but not least. This one is a bit gruesome. I didn't issue a trigger warning, I'm sorry. These are Hutu remains. This image was taken in 2006. The government was turning up mass graves, and we were documenting the extent to which the plan for genocide had continued. So our work of fact-finding was over. We could not do anything here. Monitoring had passed, but we knew that there were trend lines. The government had done this before. This was actually turned into a museum. So anyone who has been to Rwanda has visited a genocide museum. The bodies all look like this. They have calcified them with lime to dampen the scent, and of course to make clear the human form. We began reporting. So you write a lot of reports. This is what we saw. It correlates with what we saw in 1994, what we saw in 1995, 1996, and so on. Last but not least, turning away from this, I wanted to talk about some of the isolations of the work. Let's see here. You might think it's glamorous. It's not. You spend a lot of time unhappy. You have to work with people that you may or may not like. That's your lot in life. Your security is tied to them. Your physical and emotional security is tied to them. If you work within the United Nations system, this is my personal experience, you will work with a lot of people that you find absolutely morally reprehensible. They are doing the work for themselves. And I think that's a really important thing that we need to talk about, and this informs a lot of my teaching. What motivates you to do this work? Why do you want to go abroad? What does it say about you, or me in this case, that I'm compelled to keep writing and working on Rwanda as I have been since 1994? There's something going on there. The other thing is that you can't really make heartfelt, sincere friendships in the field. You might think you're going to have this amazing experience, you're going to go abroad, have this amazing group of friends. That's possible in some settings, absolutely. In emotionally tense, highly politicized, life or death situations like Rwanda, it's less possible. And the reason is you can't really trust anybody. The government is your friend, your US colleagues are your friends, Canadian American embassy people are your friends. The only thing I can say is all you have is yourself. So when Tracy says, I knew that I had to go, when you have to go, you must leave. And the UN will facilitate that. That also has always been my experience. I would say too, in terms of the people you meet, you will meet locals who make you happier than you've ever been. You'll see people with deep resilience. You may return to the United States and you'll wonder why we have so many different types of ketchup. So that's one memory I have. Standing in the grocery store saying, why? Well, they all look the same. And they are all the same. The choice that you have when you return home, it can be mind-boggling because, of course, you've never seen so much, loss or dearth in this case. I have been, I'm dismissive of birthday parties. I think they're ridiculous because of these experiences. I should apologize to my kids even though they're not here. Some of the normal sort of ups and downs of everyday, North American life, I can't tolerate it. I find them simple. I find them a waste of time, and that is deeply shaped by, the human rights work that I do. On the flip side, I have a body of knowledge on a country that everybody thinks they know about, but really don't know the deep nitty-gritty. In seeking to hold governments accountable, you may feel powerful about that. Fundamentally, Rwanda is on the path to a renewed genocide. Not anytime soon, at the trend lines, the overpopulation, the land pressures, the lack of colonization, the lack of food crops, et cetera, we can see this happening again. It gives you a platform to speak out. If people want to hear you, that's a different question. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much.
I just take my time.
Still waiting on our food, actually. So why don't we, maybe perhaps I could ask our speakers
Oh, they're all still here.
I'll let our speakers take a seat.
Yeah. I'm ready to find out how much more record. Unless I record. That's not a question. The sound of that wind. The sound of that wind. It's my wife. Thanks for
Why don't we start and see if there's anyone
we can SDI connection, but that's a real key, so they would have to know what the computers, and they do it all the time. Well, I don't know. It's been the same for the past 10 years. It's our basic classroom, so automatically it's our basic classroom, that it's a VGA connection. Like this room has VGA and HDMI. So, sign that for me.
Tracy as well, making decisions. If you have the skills to adopt, you can see we can make quite a bit of money being an adopter. In the United States, or possibly in Canada, you have to financially well. Mentioned that it's something she was interested in talking about as well. So perhaps if I might ask each of the three of you maybe talk about why you made the choices you did, go in this particular direction. So that you have the skills to go in other directions, and perhaps what directions that were perhaps more financially important.
Yeah, for me, first let me say, my two colleagues over here had that hard job. For me, I think I was in high school, when Rwanda happened, and Bosnia happened around the same time, Somalia, Haiti, Sierra Leone, Liberia, I mean, everything was incredible. And I remember feeling like this was, I guess like there was this, all these things happening that like nothing about, and I felt like that don't sound so noble at all, I really not. It was definitely selfish. Certainly not to feel some adventure, I watched Indiana Jones movies and stuff, and I thought this guy's going to be like, I don't know, it's true, it's one of the reasons a lot of people don't. And as I started to work at the UN, I worked at the UN for about 5 years before I went to the field, and so I did have a lot more contact with people that come from the field and have been through a lot. So I got a little more of the realistic angle before I really did that. But I think that was it. I think it was actually watching Rwanda how they came apart and I ended up going to Buffy about it.
And I think, like I mentioned before, my mom working at the refugee center. I mean, I grew up, we'd go out to, Vietnamese party or have lunch at the, most of the Vietnamese American students that she had when I was younger. But I think that experience from an early age and just hearing the stories that people went through. I mean, I think I remember hearing at 15, one of my brother, but he came over and right at the last minute, he was 17, 18, he had just turned 18, so something happened with his mom's paperwork, so she wasn't allowed to come, so he came over by himself, and he was just like angry. And I I remember like him coming over and my mom kind of helped him out and he's done so well and just seeing like the difference that she made. I don't know, I knew I wanted to do something internationally as far as, I think medicine I actually picked it up and open more doors in some ways. Although now when it comes to talking to the lawyers, I realize there's so many there's roles for accountants, there's roles for IT, you know, like you can pretty much do anything and end up doing work wherever you go. So I don't think I realized that at the time. Well, you know, things that you wouldn't, I don't know, that I didn't think of at that point, but I'm glad I did it, because I like reading medical journals, so I'm glad I did write everything else, but I think that's kind of where I started, so.
I mean, my answer is far less politically correct. I have a twin brother who drives me bananas. We're not close more than Scotty's like, oh, you're Clinton's Mississippi. Like, no, it's Buffalo. He's mean. So I wanted to go abroad to like break away from a very close-knit family. So it's like, well, I guess I could stay here or I could go someplace my family's never heard of. And that's basic from visit. Well, I went to Somalia and I was like, what's that? I'm like, so what? Not a what? You gonna come visit? No. So I left, so I grew up in rural Scotia, sort of like rural New York, kind of like patronage network, clientship relationships, like my dad was Big Mike and I couldn't even get a speeding ticket. I tried desperately for like a year to get a speeding ticket. It didn't happen. I'm like, let me go. So I did my graduate degree in British Columbia, like total other side of the country. Skied, didn't do that much schoolwork, didn't matter, it was super easy peasy. Already had my law degree by the time I did my master's. I'm like 23 years old, and you want to be a nation building officer? I'm like, what's that? So I said yes, and yada yada, here we are. Like seriously, that's what happened. So that's a pretty I didn't have any like, I'm gonna go help people. No man, I'm not eating.
Just to tell you, it's not usual at the UN just called you up.
I know.
I worked at the UN for 8 years before I worked at the UN.
But I entered the Berlin Wall had fallen. All these local skirmishes, you know, these civil wars are emerging, what we now call new wars, and there's a whole literature around that that is of an interest to me. And then the UN was like really trying to figure out what he's doing. He could apply, and they're like, oh my God, there's someone going to go to Somalia. What's your name? Like they would never. It was literally a different time.
Were you there with the emergency sex guy?
Yes. We were just talking about his class today. Like, and I know Andrew and.
Now you have to tell us what the emergency sex is.
There's a book called Emergency Sex and Other Desperate Measures, and it traces 3 youngsters, would have been 20-somethings, through the UN missions Rwanda, Haiti, Timor, Cambodia, Somalia, et cetera, et cetera. And it's, I used to teach it in my human rights course. I don't teach it anymore because students were like, maybe it's less. It is, it's actually kind of, it's a very self-serving, like almost kind of boring book. I'm really not doing it, let me just shut up.
Yes, please.
You talked about having to rely on people who had impure motives while you were, or impure motives.
Did I say impure?
I think that was my word,
That
just the
doesn't
wrong
sound like
word,
me.
but like not, like just that made you uncomfortable, is that the right way of putting it?
Well, I didn't know at the time they were impure. I didn't know until many years later that I was like building dossiers for a government that had no interest in actually prosecuting and like justice. Like I had a very naive, like, oh, we'll build the case and then everything will be perfect. That's not what happened. That was what I was trying to say. I perhaps didn't do a good job. I didn't know probably for not a decade, probably 6 or 8 years after, like, you know, November 1994, that the government had no intention of prosecuting these individuals. And then everywhere I looked, I was like, oh, there's a data point. And I just wrote it down. So I did a lot of journaling and like just a lot of like thinking on my own about what was going on. I mean, I spent a lot of time by myself thinking it through. Because you can't say in a highly politicized place like this, like, do you think the government's insincere? Like that's not smart. And one thing I did when I left, I didn't mention it in my talk, I actually went to the National University of Rwanda and taught law. So I was, in my mind, I was like training lawyers to try cases of genocide. So that's what happened. We had a legal determination from the criminal court, the International Criminal Court of Rwanda. No one at that time was questioning that what had happened was a genocide. And of course, 20 years later, it's like, genocide? Yeah, pretty sure. But there is this whole body of denial. So in some ways, the body of work that I built, and I didn't build it by myself, just everything was done in collaboration with other people, and I just happened to talk about it more, mostly because I did move to the academy. Like, I needed therapy, and I was like, well, if I'm going to be in therapy, I should get a PhD. Like, that's literally what I thought. That's why I started my, that's why I got to Colgate, basically, like, do all the steps and skips. But I never talked about what people's motives were. I just realized, like, looking back on it, I always had a handler with me. I always had someone trying to marry me. Like, why don't we get married just in Canada? I'm like, that's not a thing. I mean, it's a thing, I don't know. But that used to happen a lot. So people would just come at you with so much different information that you had to maintain your center, and that's what I found hard to do. So it took me a long time to understand personally that what this government was doing was actually trying to, obfuscate justice rather than promote it or create it. Even if like their national courts are considered a groundbreaking model of how transitional justice should be done after genocide. It's now being done in Sierra Leone, it's being done in Cambodia. Their model is so flawed that for the UN to make it a model, like the UN has learned nothing. And most of my critiques are actually about the United Nations. It's not about Rwanda or Rwanda. Because I can see why they did it. I just don't agree. But fundamentally, it's none of my business. Like, it's their country. It's not my struggle. I don't know what the word is.
Why don't we take a break and get some food? And then we'll give you a chance to think of even more questions. I'm very happy to see that their hands up. Please, everybody, feel free to discuss. And the food is terrific, so take as much as you like.